An Arizona Senate race is taking on new significance in the wake of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. Democratic candidate and former astronaut McSally is vying for Arizona Senator Martha McSally's seat this November. The Republican senator was appointed to office in 2019 following the death of Senator John McCain. The winner could cast a crucial vote in the potential confirmation of President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, depending on when he or she takes office. So for more on this, let us bring in Dylan Smith in Tucson, Arizona. He's the publisher and the editor of the TucsonSentinel.com. So Dylan, explain to our viewers how exactly the outcome of this election could impact the confirmation of a new justice.
Under Arizona law, because this is actually a special election, it's not a an ordinary cycle election. The person who is who wins in November will be taking office sooner than January, when pretty much everyone else takes office, because they're actually will be the elected person rather than the appointed person, whichever one of them it may be. And the real crux of it is, when exactly does that happen? It certainly doesn't happen on, the night of the election or even the very next day. In Arizona, the election isn't, quote unquote, official until it's canvassed, which means various layers of government have to go through and approve it. And the earliest that can really happen is November 30th. And that depends on if all the votes are actually counted by that point. They should be, but perhaps there's a recount, ongoing court challenges. You have to remember, the first time that Martha McSally won an election to Congress, to be in the House, it took until December 17th for her to win by not even 200 votes. So sometimes these things take a little bit more time than people who aren't so familiar with Arizona elections might expect.
So then where do the two candidates stand in the state? And could this battle over a new Supreme Court justice actually have an impact on how people vote?
On the margins, possibly. There aren't very many people who are undecided. There haven't been people who've been undecided about this or many other races for, months and months. It might move a few people to be a little bit more apt to actually show up and vote, because, unfortunately, as with everywhere, voter turnout is not what it could or should be. So it might be motivating a few more people. I don't think it really changes anybody's mind about which of the candidates they're going to choose.
Yesterday, Kelly told ABC's The View the winner of the Senate race should be sworn in promptly, because this Arizona race is a special election. And it's interesting to me, too, Dylan, that we reminded our viewers this when we were introducing you, but McSally was not elected. She was appointed, and it's similar to Kelly Loeffler in Georgia, appointed by the governor of that state there. And yet, what's fascinating to me is that they will both get votes in this Supreme Court, for the Supreme Court nominee, as if they were elected, as if they were representing the will of the people, when in fact they were not elected to that office. Sort of an interesting dynamic at play, in addition to the fact that if Mark Kelly is elected, or if he wins that race, that he would step into office earlier than in January.
And then another thing to remember about this is the reason McSally was appointed, able to be appointed, was the fact that she had just lost an election to Arizona's other senator, Kyrsten Sinema. So
right. In other words, voters rejected her. In this race. Yeah. In other words, voters rejected her when she was actually running for that seat, and then because of the way things play out in our country these days, she got appointed anyway.
And that was another, very close race. We didn't know who had won that until I believe it was the Monday or Tuesday, the week of the next week, when we were finally able to call that. And even then, there were still, tens and tens of thousands of ballots that were still waiting to be counted at that point. It's just we knew, because of the margin of the difference, that it was time to call that one.
I know you talked about whether or not the Supreme Court vacancy would maybe play a role, but I had also asked you about where the candidates are in terms of the polling, or just, what does it look like it's shaping up to be?
Well, there was that recent poll that showed things much more tight than we had been hearing, in a great many recent polls, even several this month. We've seen Mark Kelly leading by 10 points or more across the state, and Joe Biden up in Arizona as well. There was the was ABC Washington Post poll that showed them, with just within the margin of error, basically a couple of points in between them. I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between that. There were some things about that most recent poll that didn't quite add up. It showed that about 64% of Arizonans were intending to cast early ballots this year, which would be a big drop off from what we usually see, which is over 70% of Arizonans. Sometimes in some elections, 80% of Arizonans vote early. So in this year, I don't see fewer people doing that. So I got some questions about that one specific poll. But taken all together, I think this is going to be a pretty tight race, and very much all about the turnout, which is why all of these little issues maybe are more significant than they would be in an ordinary year, such as this week's Cindy McCain endorsing Joe Biden. And the McCain name is certainly something that still means a lot, especially to a certain segment of Republicans who have not been big fans of Donald Trump, of course.
As you pointed out, Dylan, we just showed that poll, President Trump nearly tying with former Vice President Joe Biden. Can you envision a world where McSally wins the election for that Senate seat, but Vice President Biden doesn't carry Arizona? Or is Commander Kelly's fortunes tied to Biden?
I think in Arizona, instead of having a coattails race down the ballot, I think Biden's fortunes in this state are much more tied to Mark Kelly's, actually.
Interesting.
I can see it's certainly possible that Kelly might win and Biden may not carry Arizona. There are so many, so-called independent voters, non-party voters in this state. In many places, it's the largest block of voters, and a lot of those folks do tend to vote for one party or another, of course, but some of them end up splitting their ballots.
Dylan Smith, interesting stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.